We're ready.
Okay. Well, tonight is, what's the date?
October 4th.
October 4th.
October the 4th, 2000. We're going to do one more talk, a few items I left out, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the final years of the Water Board. But the first thing I want to talk about is this book that I found. It's dated January 1903. But it's a report on a water purification investigation, plans proposed for sewage water works system of the Sewage and Water Board. Just a little word on definition here. A lot of people are kind of confused with the word sewer, sewage, and sewerage. Sewer is a pipe. It's a conduit that conveys sewage. We all know what sewage is. You flush it down a toilet. It's sewage. Sewer edge pertains, that's the only word you can use with system. There's no such thing as a sewer system. Sewer is a pipe. Sewerage system pertains to everything pertaining to conveying sewage to an ultimate outfall, whether it be a treatment plant or the river. Pertains to the pipes, the manholes, the pumping stations, everything. That's a sewerage system. And it pertains to everything except a sewage treatment plant. We used to have sewage treatment plant. We don't have that anymore. They got rid of the word sewage. They first say it was water pollution abatement, and I don't know what they call them now, but I mean they got rid of the word sewage. Anyway, this book was written in 1903, but it refers to two things I want to talk briefly about. And that's the pilot plant that George Earl proposed when he got elected as general superintendent in January 1900. One of his first things he did was propose treating the river water. And he had a lot of objections to that because nobody thought it could be done. Not that they didn't think it could be done, because it could. The technology was there. It was a question of how big the plant was going to be to serve a population of the city of New Orleans for future 50, 70, 80 years. But he thought it could be done. He thought he had the crew to do it. He asked the board for $20,000 to build a pilot plant. They granted that in June of 1900, $20,000. He went to work on the plant. They built it on the Batcher, on the river side, land side of the levee at Audubon Park. He did that because he wanted the public to be able to come see the plant, look at the water when it was finished, and know it was good, clean, clear water. That was in June. They got the appropriation. The plant was built by December the 15th. It went into operation. They ran it until August the 17th. And at that time, August 17th in the next year, 1901, they declared that they had enough information to know that they could purify the river water for a quarter of a penny per 1,000 gallons. That was the cost. That wasn't the cost of transmitting, that was the cost of purifying. Quarter of a penny per 1,000 gallons. In the main, I do want to, and all of that's in this book. And as we were saying before, I want you to get a little close-up picture, because this will probably be the only time that this picture, Barry, open this picture up and let him get a little close-up of this drawing right there. It's an old book.
Trying not to do. Okay.
That pilot plant revolutionized the water purification process throughout the world for $20,000. Actually, the final bill was $23,605. It went over about $3,600. But that's the little pilot plant that proved that you could do it. When they got finished, in that August 17th, and declared that we now can purify river water, and they want to shut it down, well, Audubon Park asked them to keep it going for the Audubon Park wading pool, because that's where the water went to. And they did. They kept the Audubon Park wading pool supplied with potable drinking water till 1909, when the purification plant went into operation. So the only place in New Orleans that you could get potable drinking water besides rainwater was to take a cup down to the wading pool in Audubon Park and dip it up out of the wading. That was the only potable drinking water in the city of New Orleans from 1900 to 1909. They kept it going for the Audubon Park, and I thought that was a remarkable thing that they did. You know, kept that going all that time. But the man that performed most of the tests, and there were thousands of tests, and so that's what the main part of this book is, all the tests that were done to prove it, was R.S. Weston. And his title was resident expert. He was the man that really did all the testing and proved that you could do it. And they, like I said, they had the technology. St. Louis treated river water. But the question was trying to get the right chemical, which they finally determined to be lime, for a coagulant. And it was determining how much, for how long a period on sedimentation, to get it all down to the best factor between the two for the size of the plant you were going to build. I mean, they could have built a plant that would have been 3 times. George Earl wrote in here, if it wasn't for all these tests, the plant that they were going to build, based on the knowledge that they knew to that day, the plant would have been at least 3 times bigger than the plant we have today, because they came to the best optimum square foot area, the depth of the sedimentation tanks, the amount of coagulant you put in the water, all determine that. Now, the other thing that this book highlighted on, and what I want to talk about, because it's an unusual thing, was the design of the sewage system, which really George Earl did in 1892. You recall in my previous talk, he came to the city and worked for the New Orleans Sewage Company. That's when he designed the sewage system. And his basic thought was to design a gravity sewer system that would have a main pumping station A, which is located today right behind the Municipal Auditorium, right here, and that would outfall into the river. But A would take all of the sewer. There would be one huge gravity sewer parallel to the river on Clara Street, which is several blocks on the lake side of St. Charles Avenue. In fact, pretty close back. This major sewer would then take all of the sewer from the river. We always think of New Orleans as being flat, but it's really not. It has about a 15-foot fall from the river to Clara Street, back to here. So George Earl, this is 1892, way before the water board was ever thought of. He came to town, he got the best topography map he could get. He figured out how you could design a gravity sewer system that would employ only one pumping station, A, and one lift station about midway through, station 14 they called it at that time. And he did it in probably a brilliant idea. And how I never thought of this. I worked for the water board for almost 33 years. And in 1964, you might recall, I was doing this study for the infiltration And I spent some time out in the field and observed these sewer manholes looking down in them with a double invert. Now an invert on a sewer is the bottom elevation of the sewer that runs through it. If you got a sewer running through it, the invert's bottom. This was a double invert. Sewers would come in from the front and go out, say, the left-hand side. We'd have a sewer coming out from the right-hand side, would go down below it. Each would do a curve. I'm looking down here. It was fantastic brickwork, but they were separated in elevation like 1.5 feet. I mean, you would have a sewer. It wasn't a manhole with a sewer running through it. It was a sewer coming in and going out on one side, a sewer coming in on this side and going the other, but different elevations. I asked some of the old timers, Labadet, the sheriff, why? They really had different ideas. Some said, oh, well, they were saving the cost of building another manhole downstream. They just tied them two together. I said, well, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, these sewers are in and out. It's not a terminal sewer. The sheriff, I think, told me, so well, in case one sewer downstream might get choked, if it backs up, it would overflow into the lower sewer. You wouldn't have a chokage, you would have a safety. And I said, well, no, I don't. Because the choke's going to always be there. That didn't make sense. And I left it go. I didn't really know the answer. And nobody at the water board could tell me the answer until I read this book. And I started reading the book. And another old drawing come up. Let me say a little bit about sewer design. That's another thing that he did in this book. Sewers, they decided 8-inch would be the minimum size, but you wanted to carry sewer at least at a velocity of 2 feet a second. At least that velocity to keep the solids in liquid form and keep them moving, else you'd have build up and you'd have trouble. To do that, you have to have a minimum slope of 1 foot every 300 feet. That was a minimum slope. Minimum. But to lay in sewers 1 foot 300 feet, now remember I told you you've got 15-foot fall. You could have put just an 8-inch sewer falling right straight down the streets on the slope. You'd be out of the ground. So if you just fell with the slope of the ground, that's more than 1 in 300 feet. But the trouble is, if you just kept it at that slope and you saw it flat out, you'd be 20 foot deep when you got to Clara Street. But the idea of the sewer, you take an 8-inch, you want to get as much area that you can so that you could go to a 10-inch pipe. Because a 10-inch pipe, you lay it at a little bit flatter slope. Because you have more sewer, you can keep the velocity up. And you do this all the way through to 12, 15, 18. You get up around 21-inch, you're running at a pretty flat slope and your velocities have increased. So you're in great shape. So how do you do this? Well, he did it just like a skier skiing down a hill. Did any of y'all ever go skiing?
No.
Well, you've seen skiers.
Yeah, go back and forth.
They go back and forth. They zigzag down the hill because they don't want to go too fast. So they do it by zigzag. Unfold this one. Now this one you got to be a little careful with. That's an example that he did on zigzagging of the sewers. That's the drawing that I wanted to show you, which was a brilliant concept. No other city would ever think of this because no other city had our problems with dealing with such low slopes and yet trying to keep the sewers up fast. Now what George Earl did, he left the manhole off. He didn't draw in the manhole so that you could understand, like here's the sewer starts right here. You see how it zigzags around? Well, right here, you see you're zigzagging at this point. This would be a manhole over these two sewers, but they're totally different inverts. That's why he drew it without manholes, so you can understand that one sewer is deeper than the other sewer, but you're zigzagging. Here's the river, and you're zigzagging down until you zigzag down to a bigger sewer, bigger sewer, bigger sewer, and you get on down, in the depths, in between each block, it's written on here the depths. You notice he starts off, he's 7 foot deep. Here he's 10 foot deep. Here's 11 foot, 11 foot, 11 foot, down into the big sewer. But if you'd have come straight down this hill, you'd have been not 11 feet deep, but 18 to 20 foot deep. And it was that zigzagging pattern that did it. And they spent weeks on working this little system out. And then they built a common manhole with the proper brickwork. And nobody had ever figured that out that I knew at the water board, and I don't think it's ever figured it out yet. The last person I ever talked to about this was Rudy. Rudy asked me because he saw it. And I told Rudy the same thing. That was before I got the book. I didn't know the answer. I said, Rudy, I couldn't figure it out either. So he couldn't figure it out. So maybe sometime you might want to tell Rudy that the answer is right there. He was zigzagging down so you could build a system, a sewage system, by gravity, that could handle almost the whole uptown area of New Orleans. And if we were to build this sewer today without that benefit of the zigzagging, just go in there and build it, like we did out in New Orleans East. Of course, back then we were dealing with developers, and I had to deal with isolated areas. He was designing a sewer for the entire city in one shot. I didn't get that advantage. But if you backed up and you'd say you had to deal with just developers in here, you would have probably at least 20 pumping stations. Little, small, isolated pumping stations to handle this enormous area. We're talking about a third of the city of New Orleans going through one gravity sewer.
And the sewers actually zigzag like this?
They zigzag like that with common sewers. With probably the best brickwork you're ever going to see in the bottom of those sewers. The sewers coming through there on the U-turn are built with brick, nothing else.
Can we pause for a second?
Yeah. So you don't want to just use 8-inch pipe, but you could with the thing. But he combined by zigzagging and slowing it down.
Okay.
So you could pick up more area. So you could get to a bigger pipe.
Okay.
That was the whole thing. Bigger pipes are flatter slopes because they carry more sewer and they can go flatter and still keep up the velocity. In fact, those 18 and 21 inches are much flatter, but the velocity is up around 3.5 feet a second.
Okay.
Flowing half full. Sewers are designed to flow half full with just sewage.
Mm-hmm.
You leave the other half for rain. One half for infiltration. And the velocity at a sewer flowing half full is the same velocity flowing full. But at 9/10 full, it flows a little bit faster than that. That's your best flow, is just before it gets full. Otherwise it slows down. But it's the same velocity at half full and full. Same velocity. Okay. Now, that was just two things I don't think I talked about in the history, but now I want to get to a real crucial problem with the Sewage and Water Board. And I briefly went over this with Larry the other night. I really didn't have enough time to tell him exactly what I was doing. But it all starts with George Earle's population projection, this drawing right here. George Earle in 1900, that's the date of this drawing, is October the 3rd. October the 30th, 1900. He was prepared to build a water purification plant, not for the existing population, for the future population. So the first thing you have to do is do a population projection. And to do that, you go back and get all the records you can, all the way to through the history of New Orleans, as far back as you can go, and you plot the history. Now he went back to 1790 was the first population that he got, and he got the figures, data from 1790 to 1800 from the city engineer, Office, and from 1860 to 1900 from the U.S. Bureau of Census. So they were pretty accurate. That's this portion right here up to 1900, from 1790 to 1900. He created this curve. That gave him a basis for extending that curve. You know, all you want to do now is just project that curve, saying, well, if New Orleans grew like that, we'll just project it. Now, he did 4 different projections, and he did it based on the last projection here. But the one he used was a projection of 15% increase per year, and that's this top line right here. Now remember, this little drawing that I found was done in 1900, this year, this projection. None of this dash was on there. What I did was I dashed, this dash line you see is the actual population of New Orleans, all the way up to 1963. We were at 628,800 population. That's the maximum population in New Orleans. And then we suddenly stopped growing in an immediate turn to the left. Now what's really amazing about this turn is nowhere down in here had that occurred, yet we had years of the worst epidemic deaths ever recorded in the United States. In 1833, about 1/4 of the city died. But you don't see a blip because these projections were every 10 years. So although you lost population in 1 year, you didn't lose it in that decade. So no, and then in the 1850s, the worst decade this city ever sustained, in the 1854, 55 up in here, the average lifespan was 16 years. It was 17 years in 1833, and it dropped to 16 years. That was the average life that you get that. There's a movie called Jezebel. If you ever get a chance to see it, Betty Davis. It's an old movie. She was real young. If you ever see it play, look at it, because they did an excellent job. It's about New Orleans in that time, how they were firing cannons. They thought stirring the air up with cannonballs. They burned tar at night. And they did all this in the movie.
This for yellow fever?
This is for yellow fever. They didn't know about the mosquito at that time. They thought it was the air. And the other thing they thought was if they could just get the lake breezes to mix with the river breezes, so they cut trees down between the river and the lake to get some air, to stir the air up, because in the summertime that's when it was worse. They didn't know about the mosquito. But if you ever get a chance, Jezebel with Betty Davis, it's a great movie and it really shows New Orleans and it depicts that era really good. Anyway, keep in mind we had all those terrible years, but at no point in the history of New Orleans did we ever have a decrease in population until 1963. The civil rights, and we had the Great White Flight, and it really happened. And here's the population of New Orleans. And this is from the U.S. Bureau Census all the way through. And I just got the last one and plotted it on out with 460,000. 630,000 to 460,000 population. Now when I retired in 90, right here, we were 497. And we were the same population. If you drop on right on down here, you go over 1940. That's when I retired. 1990, the city had the same population as 1940. I projected it on up to 2000, which I just got. We now are down to the population of 1930. We have the same population in New Orleans that we had in 1930. That's, to me, was
you know, pretty outstanding. But the thing that really got me, I went back and I got the yearbook, 1930, and here, open that map up and show. This is the water system of New Orleans in 1930. Now keep in mind that the population right here is the same population that we have today. But look where the population is. It's concentrated. There's hardly anything past Industrial Canal, the lower Ninth Ward, but nothing in New Orleans. New Orleans East ain't even heard of. There's nothing even in Lake Forest. There's one little 6-inch main out Hayne Boulevard that served the camps and a few houses on Hayne Boulevard, but there's nothing. There's nothing out here. And the lake's not even, Lake Vista, none of that is even there. Today, we have the same population that's right here. Keep that in mind. Look at Algiers. You have Algiers Point and you have General Mire, but you have nothing on the lower coast. Nothing on the other side of the Intercoastal Canal. So we have the same population that was here in this concentrated area that you have today. And when I say today, look at some of the areas that we now go into. And this is, to me, is incredible. That area that you're looking at there is right down in here. Today, we have water main system all the way out to Venetian Isles. I don't know if even Larry knew it, but we got a water main to Irish Bayou. We have water mains on the Algiers side all the way to the lower coast down to the Wildlife Refuge, English Turn. We are at least 3 times, same population here, but we are now serving that same population in an area that is at least 3 times bigger than that, what it equates to higher money. Now, George Earle was probably one of the smartest engineers, but he was also a city. He was a thinker. He was a developer. He was a man that looked to the future. I'm going to show Skip. You've seen this, Larry, but Skip's got to see this. This is the first annual report of the Sewage and Water Board, 1900. First one ever written by George Earle. And he was concerned he made this chart, this right here. This is 19 cities. Major cities of the United States from New York, bottom one down here is Detroit. But over here is not the population of those cities, it's the persons per mile of roadway. Persons per mile of roadway. And he ranked them on that order, with New York being at the top with 2,020 persons per mile of roadway. Well, I'd like to figure that.
Yeah.
New York is concentrated. Next was Brooklyn, St. Louis, Jersey City, Cincinnati, Philadelphia, San Francisco, Milwaukee, Chicago, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Washington, Boston, Buffalo, Providence. 19 was Detroit at 410 persons per mile roadway. New Orleans had a population at least in the top 10. They could have been in the top 5 at that time, 1900. They had a population of 280, close to 290,000, almost 300,000. Certainly more than Detroit. New Orleans was ranked dead last at 20th, well below Detroit at 380 persons per mile of roadway. Now this concerned George Earl, not because of what he knew. One, the big factor was all of these 19 cities had one thing in common and New Orleans didn't have, was a water system. 1900, New Orleans didn't have a water system. Their water was dependent upon rain. Rain's everywhere. I mean, if you get a rain, it doesn't matter that you get it from the system. It's from sewer was a hole in the ground. You could dig a hole anywhere. So nobody lived next door to anybody. Roads wasn't paved. It was a mud road. You just extended a road on down. You went on down the block, down the next street. So we were developing a city more rural than urban. And that's what concerned George Earl. Well, it concerned him about the water too because of the health problem. He knew that had to come. But he was really concerned with the way New Orleans was developing spread out. And he knew the water main would do it, but not only for the cost of distributing water, it was the cost of everything. Police protection, roads, fire protection. And look at fire protection today. Got to maintain a fire department to go 3 times what they did in 1930. But it was getting close to that in 1900. And he recognized that. But guess what? They were only 20% at that time, when he was so concerned. They were 20% below the average at 1900. 20%, and he was concerned as anybody could ever be. He said this has got to be corrected, not only for the water, but for the development of the city. It has to develop as an urban area. Today, we are over 50% above the average, below the average.
Below.
Yeah, I equated, I didn't have the miles of roadway, but I was able to equate persons per mile of roadway to persons per mile of water main. I have the yearbooks on the water mains, and I left out the major systems. I got to this system like we have here. And I'm sure I'm correct. I'm not far off. I know that. I'm right on it. But today, 1900, he was concerned with 20% below. Today, we're over 50% below the average of those 20 cities. You go back to those 20 cities, you won't find one of them. First off, you won't find any of those 20 cities with a population that has dropped like New Orleans has. And second, you won't find any that has a scattered persons per mile of roadway or per mile of water main, whatever you want to use, anywhere near New Orleans. This has never happened before to any city ever in the history of the United States. And New Orleans, I don't think can recover. I was looking at this chart here. Let's just say what can happen, what's going to happen. I'm willing to project that this line, you see it's beginning to take a little turn, and it's probably going to peter off and go straight up. It's probably going to get stagnant, but it's never, ever going to turn back. We should be at the year 2000. If George Earl was right, and he was right for 63 years, he was right on. He was just as right could be. And if he was right now we should be at 1,150,000. We're at 460,000. I don't see in any way that this line here could ever turn and even get to 500,000. It's probably going to straighten out. Hopefully it straightens out. Like I told you, when I retired, we were at the population of 1940. We're now at 1930. I think it'll probably, hopefully, it'll straighten out before we get to the population of 1920. But it'll never, ever get to 500,000. Now, how does that really hurt us? On this little bitty drawing that I got up right here. Now I did a bigger drawing, which I made a copy of, and it's on a slide. But this little drawing has really more information on it than you want to look at. This is the population. It goes up and it's back down to here. This is the water, this is the water use. Of course, it started dropping. Now, Larry told me that we have kind of leveled off there. We're not plummeting because of the tourists.
Building so many hotels.
Hotels are using water, so this factor of total water pumped and paid for is kind of leveling off, which is one good thing out of all of it. These two lines here, one represents the total cost of sewer and water per year, per capita. Now in 1940, remember when I retired in 1990, we had the population of 1940. In 1940, your cost for water per year, per person was $2.76. That's in our yearbooks. I'm not making this up. Per person now. You could have a house with, say, 4 people in it. You multiply it by 4. Now remember, there was no charge for sewer back in 1940. Sewer was free. In fact, you got one third off your water bill, off the amount of water that you consumed, was taken off the bill because it said you used up for flushing the toilet and you got that free. That's why water was so cheap in 1940. But look what happened from 1940. Soon you start seeing this line go up. And this line here going down. That's the bad part. This is the line, the cost of water per year. We're up to $167 per person per year. From $2.76 in 1940 to $167 in 1990. I don't have this year. I don't know. You said we haven't had an increase in water and sewer in the last 10 years? Is
That's
that
right, water in the last 10
So
years.
that-
We had a
that'll
sewer
still-
rate
that'll
increase
still-
this year.
Okay, but basically this will still be the right price. The same thing followed with the taxes, which is what operates the sewer system, the drainage system. It went up too. But while this is going up, this line here came down, and that's the one, this is the one that George Earl was so concerned with. We were around 600 persons per mile of water main, all the way up to about 1940. What happened in 1940 that you don't see on this map of 1930 is we crossed the industrial canal with a water main out Chef Highway. We began to move to the east. And then we just started in the 1970s. And believe me, this is the part I wanted to tell you, Larry. I got to thinking, how in the world, how did this happen? How could it be that a city losing this amount of population allowed itself to expand triple? Well, first off, the city never should have been, the corporate limits never should have been the entire parish of Orleans. It's too damn big. But it was there. All right, here's how it happened. And I was right in the middle of it. I'm just as guilty as anybody. I first started going to PAC, Planning Advisory Committee. This is a committee that meets prior to the city planning. Every item that's going to come up to city planning comes up to PAC. PAC is composed of Department of Streets, Sewage and Water Board, NOPC, South Central Bell, School Board, city planning, you name it. Whatever, that's the staff. That picture over there is all of the past presidents, and I was president of that organization for 2 years. But anyway, I first went, I'd say 67, 68, along with Mr. Ford. Just go along and carry the papers and learn about it. At that time, we had 3 people from Sewage and Water Board that went. Benny went to Benedetto, and Biso, and Port, and I went along with it. Suddenly, about 1972 or 74, it was just me. Because by that time, we had combined the drainage with sewage, and I was the only one that would go. So I was the Sewage and Water Board representative. And we were doing subdivisions like crazy. Right? The first thing they would ask when a new subdivision come up, they looked at me. In fact, the water board was so important, you couldn't have a meeting without the water board.
PAC, if I fail to show, they cancel. It's in their rules. You can't meet unless the water board, Department of Streets, and I think city planning. If those three are not there, you don't have a quorum. Anyway, the first question would be, is sewer and water available? I'd say no. Well, that didn't go over too. Oh, wait a minute. The developer would go, well, we know it ain't available. I mean, if it was available, it'd be out of there. So they revised the question, could it be made available? Well, hell yeah. I mean, if you're not going to put a dollar sign out there, you can make sewer and water available anywhere. So, okay, well, that was all right. Sewer and water could be made available. Even though, and I would know this, even though a sewer pumping station would be required. And maybe a force main. Maybe we didn't have a force main at the time. We're out in Lake Forest. But the question was, could it be made in accordance, and I'd always say it can be made available in accordance with the standard policy with developers with the Sewage and Water Board, which was written by Neil Jeffrey. And it was a good policy. Had some good stuff in there. If we just would have followed the rules. But up came, now I didn't want to go along with having little pumping stations handled. Say a guy wants to develop 100 acres. He could go out and get one of these little can stations that Jefferson Parish has 1,000 of them. Put it in at his total cost. But we'd have to maintain and operate it. And that was going to be too many pumping stations. I designed a system of sewer, future sewer for the whole Lake Forest area, covering a pumping station about 300 acres. And we would design the pumping station, Sewage and Water Board, and it would be a good pump. Well, when I tell them the policy called for the developer to pay 50% of the cost of the pumping station, the Water Board paid 50-50. But the problem was, my station handled 300 acres, say, and this developer wanted to develop 100 acres. Well, he didn't think it too fair. It really wasn't. But it would have stopped the development had we just held our guns. But it got one developer come along and proposed and got to Neil and got to Sullivan and said, hey, why can't I pay a pro rata share? I'll just pay, instead of a half, I'll pay my, say, 1/3 of a half. And they went along with that. Well, I don't remember who the developer was. I remember it was, he had connections and it kind of irritated me. But ever since then, I just took the line, well, hell, we'll do it with all of them. Well, what would happen, a developer soon like now, say the 100 acres are way up here, and here's a pumping station for this 300 acres in the middle. Now you got a trunk sewer to get to that acre. It was a 50-50 for the trunk sewer. The developer would pay the 50-50 because he was going to develop the land between. He was smart to go out here, get us to pay 50% of the trunk sewer, which once it's in, even though it might not be in his name, but he was connected with the other development of the sewer along the route, but he got 50% of that sewer. The trunk sewer, that's the deep sewer, that's the costly sewer. We paid 50%. Now, the pumping station. Oh, I hate to tell you about the pumping station. We would do the trunk. Sullivan would not go along with a can station. Now we had a raft of good manufacturers of really good stations. Now some of them were trash, but some of the can stations were good. None of them would suit him. He wanted a poured in place concrete station, 18 inches wall on those things, with a common slab at the bottom, which was ridiculous. I mean, wet well and the station was both at the deepest. I mean, this was all on piling, even though we'd take borings and it wouldn't even. No, you got to put it about 36 pilings, and some of them they'd try to drop them. Hell, they wouldn't sand it. They'd have to cut them off. That didn't matter. It had to be on piling, 18-inch, separate, not a common wall. Now, many of the concrete stations, you'd put a common wall between your wet well and the pumping station, right? I mean, that was, you got reinforcing, right? No. He had a separate space between the two. and he came on out of the ground with the pumps because he wanted them above the flood. In case it flooded, he wanted the pumps above the flood. Well, that was just, man, we talking maybe $500,000 when it could have been 100,000 at least, just to build it. But I would send the plans around, and I sent them over to the electrical boys. You can't imagine what those guys wanted. Eddie Arnold and that bunch. They came up, just for instance, you had a little bubbler. You feed a bubbler tube to, you don't use like a dipstick in the wet well to determine the elevation. Use a bubbler tube. And to make a bubble at the bottom, takes a little bit more pressure. And that way you don't have any clogging at all of any float tubes, anything like that. They use a bubble. Well, this station, the contractor had to put in a bubbler system and furnish another one, right, set it on the floor, right next to it. A free one, just in case the other one went out.
Okay.
I mean, it was like they duplicated everything. It was unbelievable when I get the specs back. And this went on every time I sent them. I mean, they'd do it one time, they'd revise, and then we get another station, they'd add more stuff. So we got one of the best pump station designs ever. But it was the costliest thing ever, and we were paying for it though. The water board, the ratepayer was paying and allowing this development proceed. And then we'd come along with trunk sewers, he trunk force mains, he put in a trunk force main out Morrison Road. New Orleans East came up on the scene. This is beyond Paris Road. They came on and they gave the water board a paltry lump sum, and I can't remember what it was. I'm thinking it was 80,000. I don't know why. It might have been less than that. For extending the water main, the trunk 36-inch water main out, the wire down to Chef, and that got them water. Then we had the old Michoud pump treatment plant.
Sewage treatment.
Higgins, the old Higgins plant. They redid that, and they did it on the cost. And that got them started on sewer because they had a sewer treatment plant. Finally, though, the development in New Orleans East got to the point where that little treatment plant was getting at capacity. So at last I was able to tell city planning near the end of my era, is sewer and water available? No. Can it be made available? No. What do you mean no? I said sewer and water can, but there is no sewer treatment facilities available, and that would stop them in their wake. Now suddenly though, we went back and we phased out the Michoud plant and put in that huge force main back to the East Bank treatment plant, so progress proceeded. And then all of a sudden one day, Venetian Isles subdivision was built. I had nothing to do with it. Beyond me, I had nothing at the City Planning Commission. Hands off, Sewage and Water Board has no comment. They built an oxidation pond out in the marsh, which was a joke. Oxidation pond. It was a porous levee that really was like born. I mean, they went across the lake back in the marsh and threw up. Can you imagine a levee made out of the stuff that they throwing up? The rainwater, Don Crowder,
It won't last long.
said the muskrat had ate it. There wasn't nothing to it. He said it's a pond, but I mean it's like it ain't even there.
Nutrient get it.
Anyway, they did that. They built it, and they had a little nice subdivision. I guess it's still there. I went out there. Very nice. They had a water tank. Their water supply was a well. Beautiful water. There wasn't nothing wrong with the water. Had a round, looked like a golf ball. And they were on their own, and suddenly one day, I get worried that we're going to run a 12-inch water main out Chef Highway. And we headed to Industrial Parkway. We talking running out Highway 90 miles with a water main. Why? Well, that was get the politician that was involved in it, because their water was getting a little color to it, they said, and we had to go out there, and that was at water board cost, the ratepayer. So suddenly now we're serving
and then they decide the oxidation pond really isn't a pond. Well, Don Crowder told them that from the beginning. But now suddenly it wasn't. So then if we don't run a 12-inch force main back and discharge into